Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about my favorite philosopher, one of them, and I think the most important philosopher for philosophy of religion. Um, his name is Mircea Eliade. So, a little bit of background about Eliade. He was born March 13th in 1907 and died April 22nd of 1986. He was born in Romania. He was raised Romanian Orthodox, and as a child, he was fascinated with the Christian faith he was brought up in. And he also took an interest in Romanian mythology, and he thought of it as a connection with his ancestors. And that continued throughout his life, his interest in Romanian mythology and the Romanian god Zalmoxis. So, the beginning of his ideas, uh, he started down the course of a life of ideas very early on. Growing up, he aimed to find and record what he believed was the common source of all religious traditions, and eventually he moved away from a strict conservative Orthodox faith to more perennialism. He saw so many similarities in different religions and different mythologies that they all seemed to have a common source, even though people articulated these stories and these beliefs differently. They all seem to be trying to get at a common source, a common ultimate reality. So he was educated, college educated between 1925 and 1928, where he attended when he attended University of Bucharest and eventually earned his master's in philosophy. Um, in late 1928, he traveled to Calcutta to study Sanskrit and Indian philosophy under his teacher, whose name I could not pronounce. And then in 1930, he hit a bit of a road bump because he fell in love with his teacher's uh, or his host's daughter, his host and teacher, um, his daughter, who was only 16 at the time, and he had a sexual relationship with her. So he's a grad student and she's 16, so that was obviously frowned upon. And as a result, Eliade was kicked out of his host's house after this. 3 years later, he did receive his PhD from the University of Calcutta with a dissertation on yoga, which was actually made available and published in, I believe, the 2000s. So you can go out and buy his dissertation. Then he went on to teach. He taught at the University of Bucharest. He taught philosophy and religion starting in 1933, and he eventually came to University of Chicago in 1956, and he was appointed visiting professor at first, and then professor and chairman of the History of Religions department until his retirement in 1983. So the methodology of Eliade is called phenomenology. A phenomenological examination of religion seeks to understand religion as a practitioner understands it, not as a scholar would understand it. Um, that means phenomenology does not seek to examine the truth claims of a religion, but rather the experiential claims. So it's not about whether the God of the Bible is true or not. It's about how a Jew or a Christian experiences the God of the Bible in their own life through religious practice. That's what a phenomenology of religion seeks to examine. It's not asking, well, does the biblical God really exist? That's irrelevant to a phenomenological claim or a phenomenological approach, I should say. Um, Phenomenology of religion expands into the disciplines of history, religion, psychology, sociology, anthropology, philology, and more. So it's very extensive, and it's had a lot of impact on academia. So, the major ideas of Eliade, and I have quoted here one of my professors who said every great philosopher has about one or two great ideas that they just repeat over and over again. So, I would say this is certainly true for Eliade. Um, He has a few major ideas that he repeats over and over again, and he certainly makes his point. And these ideas are so profound that he can repeat them over and over again, and it doesn't get boring. So, his two great ideas. Number one is the sacred and the profane. For Eliade, reality is an interplay of two dimensions of existence, the sacred and the profane. The primordial man slash religious man seeks to live in the sacred, while secular contemporary man consciously or unconsciously lives in the profane, or at least thinks he does. That'll be discussed later on whether we can ever really get away from the sacred. Eliade seems to think that we can never really get away from the sacred. The sacred is immanent. Um, Now, what is the sacred? This is important to say. The sacred is uh, what is outside of, well, the sacred is what's outside of the profane, but maybe that doesn't give you much to go off of immediately. The sacred is a suspension of uh, the ordinary world. It's a suspension of ordinary life. It doesn't necessarily mean miracles. It just means having an experience, having a religious experience that touches you deeply and is profound to you, and often impacts your life in such a way that you live differently. If you had that experience rather than not having that experience. So the idea of an epiphany, right? Something dawning upon you, and for this, it's an epiphany of how reality works for the religious person. Um, it's an epiphany. It could be an epiphany of God's love. It could be an epiphany in the form of a theophany, an apparition of the divine, right? So it's anything that really stops you in your tracks, takes you out of the ordinary, mundane life, and takes you into sort of the profound, right? The sublime, and that of course connects to his second most important idea, which is a hierophany. He defines a hierophany as a breakthrough of the sacred into the profane, and it can manifest as revelatory illumination, like nirvana in the Eastern tradition, or noesis in a Western esoteric tradition. So you think of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, right? He has this moment of nirvana where he realizes the nature of things. In that moment, he is taken out of the profane and into the sacred, into really ultimate reality, right? Later Buddhist accounts will say, he realizes the reality of the Dharmakaya, the truth body of the Buddha, um, uh, and the Dharmakaya is ultimate reality. Um, he understands the nature of things. So in that moment where he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, he is no longer a just a man in the ancient world of India, right? He is taken out of time and into the sacred. The sacred is the suspension of time, and same with noesis, right? In the Western tradition, we have philosophers like Plotinus, who is recorded to have achieved a sort of noetic enlightenment 4 times, as his biographer says. And in those moments, right, he's taken out of ordinary time. He's taken out of the ordinary world, and he is experiencing the sacred, right? Much like what I described with the Buddha. Um, so hierophany can be this illumination, but I don't want to just limit it to that, because it's not limited to that. It can also manifest as a place or an object that carries significant and archetypal meaning. So sacred sites, right? Jerusalem, Delphi, the shrine at the Bodhi tree, where Buddhists can go and they can see the temple that stands there where the Buddha reached enlightenment. The religious practitioner can go to these sites and experience the sacred for themselves. You can have a profound experience, right? And this is the core of what it means to be religious, according to Eliade. Um, it is to experience a hierophany and to be taken out of profane space and into sacred space, and then to realize that the sacred is eminent and it is all around us, and the profane is sort of ever fleeting. It doesn't even really exist. So that is my introduction to Eliade. I hope you enjoyed it. There's a lot more to sort of get into with Eliade. He's a very deep thinker, but this has been my introduction. Thank you.